From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Monday, February 3. Food suppliers say the government's renewables target is sending their energy bills through the roof. The independent food distributors peak body, which represents 200 food manufacturers, suppliers and distributors, wants Labor to shift its focus to coal and gas production it says will bring prices down. US President Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing tariffs on Mexico, Canada and China on Sunday. Trump said the levies were designed to stymie the illegal drug trade, but experts say it's laying the groundwork for a continental trade war. You can read our experts' analysis right now at theaustralian.com.au. More Israeli hostages held for over a year by Hamas have been reunited with their loved ones. But questions swirl around the fate of some of the Middle East conflict's youngest and most recognisable hostages. That's today's episode. It was a moment 484 days in the making. Yarden Bibas, finally free after more than a year in captivity, reunites with his sister, Ofri, and father, Eli. "We love you," Eli said over and over as his adult son clung to his dad. "Keep your sense of humour. We love you." Ofri, also wrapped up in her dad's embrace, pulled her brother close. Earlier on Saturday, Yarden and two other men taken hostage on October 7, 2023, were released by the Hamas militants who held them captive.
The three men were released today as part of the Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal. In exchange, Israel is expected to free more than 100 Palestinian prisoners and allow for additional humanitarian aid.
To date, almost 600 Palestinian prisoners held in Israel's jails have been released and deported to Egypt, Palestine and the West Bank. 251 Israelis were taken hostage by Hamas in the October 7 attack. 18 have been released since the exchanges began on January 19. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's repeatedly vowed to bring the hostages home alive, said he was thrilled to welcome Yarden Bibas home, along with 54-year-old Ofer Calderon and 65-year-old American-Israeli man Keith Siegel.
Ofer, Yarden, Keith, kama tov lirot etchem babayit.
But he noted the job is far from done, saying his government is working to bring Yarden's young children, Ariel and Kafir, and his wife Shiri, home.
בשעות אלה, המחשבות של כולנו נתונות לשירי, אריאל וכפיר ביבס.
Little Kafir Bibas was just 9 months old when Hamas invaded southern Israel more than 15 months ago, making him the youngest person to be abducted by the terror group. He turned 2 on January 18, one day before the ceasefire came into effect, and the second time the milestone has been marked in captivity. Kafir and his big brother, 5-year-old Ariel, both sport a shock of instantly recognisable red hair. In November, Hamas said the duo and their mother had been killed in a strike by the Israeli Defence Force and released distressing footage of the moment Yarden was told his wife and children were dead. But come January, their names reappeared on an initial list of 33 hostages to be released under the terms of the ceasefire deal, giving members of their extended family fresh hope they're alive. However, despite the safe return of Dad Yarden, the fate of Kafir, Ariel and Shiri is unclear.
The uncertainty is widespread because there has been no confirmation, and that's the vacuum that everybody is existing in because Yarden has been released. He's got no idea.
Jacqueline Magnay is the Australian's Europe correspondent.
He's clinging to the faintest of hope that they are still alive, and since December in 2023, he was told that they had died in an airstrike by the Israelis. And he was at the time asked to do a video condemning Israel about the attacks and also that they needed to release their bodies. Now, he's done that video. Israel did not release it at the time because they said it was propaganda. The Israeli Defense Force has said they have very grave concerns about the status of Shiri and the boys, but they don't have any proof from Hamas about that status. So there is this enormous uncertainty. And of course, it kind of exemplifies the agony for the Israelis about this. And that terrified image just sticks with everybody because they've seen nothing else of them.
On Wednesday, the Israeli government demanded that Hamas provide definitive answers about the status of Shiri, Ariel and Kafir. Jack, is there a world in which Shiri and her children have died in captivity and Hamas, understanding the fragility of this ceasefire deal, is prolonging confirmation of that fact for as long as possible so as not to provoke a fresh attack by the IDF? Or, on the flip side, is this uncertainty about their fate just another way to inflict further anguish on the extended Bibas family and, by extension, the Israeli people?
Well, Hamas, by not releasing this information, it serves several purposes, really. It keeps everybody guessing. It means that there won't be an outpouring of anger if they are confirmed to have been dead at a time when negotiations for the ceasefire to be a permanent one is ongoing this week. So it's an incredibly sensitive and raw time. And I think Hamas is playing a psychological game that it's in their interests for people not to know what's happened, but that also it gives them leverage in these negotiations for them to extract perhaps more prisoners, perhaps more concessions. So they're not going to confirm anything to anybody at this stage.
Coming up, what next for the hostages and for the ceasefire deal? Reflecting on the safe return of Yarden Bibas, Ofer Calderon and Keith Siegel on Sunday, Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu said he wouldn't tolerate any violations of the ceasefire deal brokered over months by a coalition of Qatari and American negotiators.
מוקדם יותר השבוע, בפעימה הקודמת, הבהרנו באופן נחוש שלא נקבל את הפרת ההסכם.
On Tuesday, Netanyahu will meet with US President Donald Trump at the White House in Washington, D.C., with negotiations over the truce's second phase expected to get underway after that, though no formal date for the talks has been set.
Netanyahu's office said that US President's West Asia envoy Steve Witkoff will talk to Qatar and Egypt, key mediators, after which steps to advance the negotiations will be discussed with the Israeli Prime Minister.
And that's where there's expected to be some tension. Phase 2 of the ceasefire deal requires not only the release of any remaining hostages by Hamas, but also the declaration of permanent peace and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. Israel's wary of declaring peace because it says it wants to be able to defend itself if Hamas regroups. And Hamas say they won't release the hostages until they can be sure they won't be targeted by the IDF. Phase 2 is due to begin next month. So should we expect it to go ahead as planned? Here's Jacqueline Magnay.
I think this second stage of negotiations is very much up in the air. We've got several tension points happening at the same time. Within Netanyahu's government, he has to appease the hawks in his government because he would lose power if they resign. So he's got to keep his own politicians happy, and some of them are not content with any kind of permanent ceasefire with Hamas. They really want to have that option to be able to return to hostilities because they perceive Hamas to be an ongoing threat. And until that threat is reduced to a minimal extent, they're not going to agree to that. So Netanyahu's treading a very fine political line. He's meeting with Trump, who wants a ceasefire, wants all the hostages released, wants refugees to be housed in neighbouring countries, wants major upheaval in the Middle East, really, because he wants to focus on Iran and the issues that Iran poses with their nuclear power. So this incredible shifting sands of the Middle East is continuing, and nobody quite knows where that second stage of talks is going to land at this point. I think people are optimistic because the Israeli people want all the hostages returned, and they're willing to give up anything for that to happen. But once we see some of the hostages returned that are dead, I think the mood will change and that they will realise that perhaps they're not going to get all the hostages back in the lovely waving, smiling way that we've seen so far. So I don't think anyone can say with certainty that this second stage is going to go ahead as what's been proposed.
Jacqueline Magnay is the Australian's Europe correspondent. You can read all the latest on the situation in the Middle East right now at theaustralian.com.au.